Well, Andy Murray, cast your mind back to 2013 and the pop landscape at the time. The sound of the summer, of course, was Daft Punk's Get Lucky. That was emblematic of what pop was at the time. It was kind of the tail end of the Black Eyed Peas. It was very upbeat. It was very happy. It was all about partying and getting drunk and pulling guys or gals or whoever you want out in the club. That's all we were talking about. And then Lorde came along and released Tennis Court, which a friend of mine put me on before the album Pure Heroin came along. And I thought, wow, this is such a breath of fresh air. It's kind of like an anti-pop song about how Lorde, this 16-year-old girl at the time, is just kind of sick of everyone and kind of sick of how sort of surface level modern pop is. And then I thought that was really cool. And then she dropped Royals in the run up to the album release and everyone went crazy over it. But for me, that was kind of more conventional. So I didn't know which way the album was going to sort of go. Was it going to be this sort of experimental anti-pop thing, or was it going to be kind of more conventional, kind of upbeat and kind of more mainstream? And it was eventually this kind of perfect blend of the two. It was a brand new sort of vision, I thought, for like pop. Obviously it was harkening back to a lot of older influences, but at the time we hadn't anything like it. And then I just found every single track on this album just talking to me. He was talking about postcodes that nobody in media cares about. It was on about not being a white teeth teen and stuff like that. And I just found it so resonant, and it blew me away, and I had no idea why this music, because at the time I wasn't really into pop or anything that wasn't my niche of crappy indie nonsense. And I just found like this strange voice appealing to me so much, and every single track on the album sort of blew me away, and it's so melodic, and I think Lorde's voice is just kind of so good. It's kind of dark and mature and purposeful, and it was just something I hadn't heard at the time. I don't think we'd have artists like Billie Eilish who sort of embraced that kind of anti-pop, dark, kind of gothic mentality and approach to songwriting and pop songs in general if we didn't have someone like Lorde to kind of usher it in the first place. And the second album wasn't a surprise because the first one was so good, and then Melodrama came out and just battered everything else away, and then she was like, right, I'm only 19, but I'm also the queen of pop now, so you can all just go away into the bin.
So, I always knew who this band were, because I knew a lot of their stuff that came out before this album. I always thought they were a little bit too heavy for me. I like a bit of heavy metal, but these guys were just a bit too like, when it gets to the point where you don't know what the words are and you can't differentiate whether it's even English, then it's kind of not really for me. But Parkway Drive brought out Ire a couple of years back. I want to say, I think it was 2017. I could be wrong. Maybe 2018. But they brought out Ire, and my fiance was like, I'm gonna pick up Parkway Drive's new album, and I'm like, really? And he's like, oh, can we play it in the car on the way home, on the 3-hour drive home? I'm like, really? Oh, okay. I'm quite open-minded, really. I'm making a joke. I'm quite open-minded when it comes to music. So we stuck this album on, and I was like, oh, holy butts, this album is so good. And I did not expect it to be so good because, like I say, I'd heard the previous stuff and it just wasn't really for me. But Ire, it has just some tracks. I mean, like, there's a track where he literally is going like, crushed by the fists of God. And for some reason, it's just so like, oh, this speaks to me. I too feel like I am sometimes crushed by the fists of God. And just thinking about like blotting out the sun and destroying, and just, it's such a good album, and I didn't really expect to like it. So that one definitely blew me away. Parkway Drive.
Gonna show my age slightly here because I was in uni when New Rave was a thing, and I didn't like it. I didn't get it. Like check, Hadouken, Forward Rusher, Does It Offend You? Yeah, didn't like it. Wasn't a fan. All my friends were really into it, and I was like, this is terrible. Why would you ever waste your time listening to this when like Incubus and Deftones exist and things like that? I was like, nah, not for me. Don't like it. Refused to go and involve myself in the nights out that were playing it. Refused to like listen to it when I was at home. But I did do the uni magazine. So when Claxon's Myths of the Near Future came out, I was like, I'll review that, because I already had like 5 or 6 like lines in my head to bury the genre and bury the band with, and I put it on. And I think even before the album finished, I had face paint on. Like, it's just like, it was the best thing. I think I didn't know music sounded like that or could be that fun or like out there. And it was really, really good, and it completely changed my mind on the whole genre, and I love that album. And like by the end of that week, I was at New Rave Night, like white t-shirts covered in like felt tip and stuff. I bought both the Mighty Boosh series on box set. It changed who I was as a person, and I wasn't expecting that. Blew it away.
So originally I was going to say Billie Eilish's When We All Fall Asleep, Where Do We Go? But I thought that's a bit too mainstream, and I feel like that's what a lot of people would have said. So instead I'm going with another band which aren't kind of mainstream still, and that band is Wolfpack. And if you haven't checked them out yet, it's unbelievable. They play the most amazing live gigs ever, usually just in Ireland, but they're also big in America as well. And every single album of theirs blew me away. So I'm getting them all in, and I'm saying all of them are unexpected because I've never heard a sound so. They call themselves funky and low volume, and I agree with that because they are funky and low volume. And the bass player is called Joe Dart, and personally I'm a bass player as well, and he inspires me so much. He's so good, and I've got a song called Dean Town where the entire crowd sing his bass line, and that to me is like, that is a dream, and I want to do what he does. So Joe Dart, I want to be you. And I also like Wolfpack. So every single one of their albums, The Beautiful Game, Hill Climber, Mr. Finish Line, and another one I can't remember, Thrill of the Arts I think it's called, all stunning albums, and they all blew me away.
So for this thing, again, they're always hard. I have to do the little preamble. It's very hard thinking of it because as someone who listens to music 24/7, it's hard picking a thing. But the last time I listened to something, and it really did just make me go, "Oh my God, this is like that." You know, when you get that certain level of joy that only music can give you, where it's like throughout your entire body and nothing else feels that good. It was Dance with the Dead's Near Dark. Which was, I was already into synthwave because of Hotline Miami and the Hotline soundtracks and some of the stuff from Drive. But Dance with the Dead are a synthwave band that twin synth stuff and synth sound, different sound bites and effects and synthesizers with thrash metal. And it's just not necessarily so much on Near Dark, they have little bits of it, but they would only go further and further into that stuff, like their B-sides or their new album Love to Death. They're literally like a thrash metal synth band, and I adore that combination. But all those ingredients are in Near Dark. Even from the opening song, like Invaders, there's a whole bit in the middle of that where they just do a whole like tempo change and they build up to like this big drop, and when that kicks in, it's just euphoric. Like, it's absolutely lush. And yeah, if I was going to just encapsulate why I adore synthwave, I would just give someone that album. I love synthwave and metal, all right? So that.
No.
Yeah.
It's actually an album from one of my favorite bands, which might not make sense, but let me unpack this. It's Emperor of Sand by Mastodon. So this band really captured me in 2004. I think I was like 17 years old. Leviathan came out, changed my perception of what a metal album could and should be. Took me away from standard verse, chorus, catchy bit type metal. Introduced progressive sounds, heavier sounds, louder, more abrasive sounds, and kind of opened a whole bunch of new musical doors that I'm still exploring today. They released Blood Mountain after that, more of a refined take on the very similar format. Then they came out with Crack the Sky, which I genuinely regard as one of the greatest albums, my favorite albums ever made. It is a proggy voyage, a ridiculous story about a czar going up to space and coming back. It's kind of ridiculous on paper, but it's a beautiful, beautiful piece of music. A couple of years later, they come out with The Hunter. The Hunter turns me off Mastodon completely. It's a Torch album, and Torch are pretty good. We don't need two Torches. Torch do Torch. Mastodon shouldn't do Torch. It was poppy, it was kind of sugary, it was a lot less complex. Daler's awesome drum fills just kind of weren't there on the same level. It really turned me off. I think I've listened to it maybe 4 or 5 times. I tried to get into it, just didn't catch on. So when Emperor of Sand comes around, I'm not exactly looking forward to this. I'm figuring this will be more of the same. And then I hear Know Yourself. I'm like, oh my God. Mastodon have just released a Queens of the Stone Age B-side as the lead single for the new album. This former progressive, towering, sludgy juggernaut of the genre have totally sold out. They're gone, they're done, they're dead to me. I listened to the whole album, didn't I? Turns out it's actually brilliant. They totally reversed the format. They still have the poppier elements, the softer elements. There's a few catchy choruses in there. Know Yourself is in there. But it does a really, really good job of bridging the earlier stuff with the kind of jangly, angular riffage from albums like Remission, and wraps it up in a much more accessible bow without sacrificing musicality and interest levels. And yeah, it's just a perfect mesh of old and new. And I know it's their like worst reviewed album, but I don't care. It's really good.
So Hoobastank. Let's talk Hoobastank. Yeah. When most people would have been first aware of them was The Reason. The Reason was, I think it was in was in Bridget Jones or something like that. It was in some sort of nonsense film like that. I really like Bridget Jones. I don't know why I'm saying that. And it became like the wedding anthem for a good 5-year period. And that's not what Hoobastank were, but that was what Hoobastank were to me, sort of, at the time. And then in 2012, after a little hiatus of a few years, they came back with Fight or Flight. And I fully expected to just pay no attention to it. And for some reason, I don't know how, I listened to a couple of songs. This Is Gonna Hurt is the opening track, and it was the first one I heard from it. I was like, this is actually okay. And then I started to listen to it. It's one of those albums where I wouldn't say it's all killer, no filler, but it sort of, it plods along nicely, and it's a really good sound for them. It's more mature. They could have pushed it a little bit more and gone a little bit darker, but it's more grown up, it's more edgy, especially than you'd expect if you'd listened to The Reason as their like sort of anthem. And it's just really good. I still listen to it now, like, 7 years on?
Right, now again, as every single person has said for this section of our chatty faces, is that this was a really difficult choice, and it's hard to think of because I kind of approach everything thinking, oh, I might like this. Like, it's not so much I'm gonna hate it, but one that kind of came out of left field for me and is now one of like my favorite bands and like integral music taste sort of things was Non-Stop Feeling by Turnstyle, which is a fantastic album, but I just didn't give hardcore the time of day for ages. I thought everything had to sound like Expire or Knocked Loose or Backtrack, and those are all fantastic bands that it took me a while to get into and like grow with. I went through a period of time just being like, oh no, I'm not going to give it time. It's all really heavy. It's not my sort of thing. I only like noughties, pop punk, and emo. Don't talk to me about anything else, please. And then I just took a step back and was like, nah, actually, listen to it, give it some time. Went to some gigs, and seeing it live is just ridiculous. Like, you get way more into it. But anyway, Turnstyle, Non-Stop Feeling was one of their earlier albums. Time and Space has come out now, which is the best one ever. But this is the one that kind of got into their whole crossover-y sort of sound, where it's all these horrible, like, moany, screechy vocals, where he's just kind of straining on top of really good riffs. And you've got like Gravity and Drop. Oh my god, I listen to Drop on the way to work all the time. It's just like a 1:30 song. It's the ultimate length of song. And I just, big pop every time. Blue by You, also fantastic. And I was so mad at myself that I hadn't given this album a proper, actual good go until I did. But yeah, like, I couldn't believe it missed my radar for so long, and I had all these friends telling me, oh, listen to Turnstyle, listen to Angel Dust, listen to Trapped Under Ice, and this whole collective of bands that all come together. And I recommend it to all of you, as well as Angel Dust and Trapped Under Ice. All of it, good stuff.
Show me shoes.
Why am I showing them my shoes?
Because they're really metal.